Cops and other law enforcement people have read it. What were some cases you worked on that made you think, even if for a moment, that something supernatural or paranormal was going on? Former EMT, firefighter here. One night we got a call to do a wellness check on someone who dialed 911 but didn't respond to the operator. We pull up to the address and the house looks perfectly quaint and a little old lady greets us at the door. We asked her if she knew who placed the call, but she told us that she lived alone since her husband died. We barely got back to the station before a call comes in again, same address as before. So we drive back out, talk to the old lady again, then leave again. And just as we get back to the station, same call, same address, no response. We drive out there again, believing that the old lady must have been confused. But this time when we pulled into the driveway, the old lady wasn't at the door to greet us. There was no reply at the door, but it was unlocked. We take a peek inside to find the old lady was on the floor and wasn't breathing. We rushed in to help and got her to a hospital in stable condition. When she woke up in the ambulance, she still claimed that she never called us, and that we arrived almost immediately after she had fallen. It was a 15-minute drive to her house from the station. Before she was admitted to the hospital, she asked me and another EMT if we could bring her knitting needles and bag of clothes to her in the hospital. I offered to pick up her stuff because I had a friend who lived in that area and we were gonna hang out anyways. I pick up my friend and drive to the lady's house. I ran inside to grab the bag and knitting stuff while my buddy sat in the car. But just as I was leaving, I swear I felt a hand on my back and heard a voice say thank you. When I get back in the car, my friend asked me why couldn't the lady's husband bring her stuff to the hospital. I explained that her husband was dead, but when I said that, my friend said, "But I saw an old guy in the window." He smiled and waved at me. At first I refused to believe in anything supernatural, so I called the police and asked them to do a sweep of the house. I thought it was a squatter. Nothing was out of the ordinary, and no one was inside. I later brought my friend to visit the lady. He started describing the old dude who was in the window, but the old lady almost immediately started tearing up and said, "That's my Harold." Obligatory not my story, but when I read this I thought it was pretty fucked. An elderly lady phoned 911 and requested that they send some policemen down to her house because she saw a shadowy figure lurking in her backyard. She was living by herself at night and didn't feel safe watching someone through her window. When the policemen arrived, the door was unlocked. They walked in and found the lady seated facing the window, and they went to go check the backyard. There were no signs of anyone attempting to break and enter, and nothing was missing. She had very tall fences surrounding her property, making it nearly impossible for anyone to get into it. They did, however, find footprints on the inside of her home. It was quite possible that she had left the door unlocked and wasn't looking outside, but rather at a reflection of someone inside of her home, behind her. EMT here, once had a call at our local mall. Show up and an 8-year-old was having breathing problems. Her mother, aunt and cousin had just been caught stealing and it was late at night. We assumed the breathing problem was stress-induced. Once we got into the back of our unit, she looked my partner and myself in the eyes and said that she lived at a bad place. She said she lived with demons, and I shit you not, as she described the demons, her heart rate plummeted to 90 BPM to 45 BPM in a matter of seconds. My partner and I looked at each other and immediately started trying to lighten the mood and preparing for a code. She ended up being okay. I will never forget that experience. My grandpa was a REO in Vietnam. Basically the guy who told the pilot where to go and what was ahead. One day him and his team is finishing up a mission, and one of his buddies in another jet barrel rolls over them. He then descends into the clouds. They never saw them again. He just vanished. They searched for weeks but no crash site, no communications, nothing. Just poof, gone. When I was in Afghanistan on guard duty, I turned to see this huge panther in the middle of a farm field. The thing must have been 30 feet long. My heart started pounding like crazy and I just about radioed it in. Then I realized my nods removed depth perception and I was seeing a normal cat about 5 or so feet in front of me on the guard shack ledge. This is unexplained, and probably just coincidence, but I still never mention it to my co-workers. I spent some time as a homicide investigator. We would respond to all apparent suicides and investigate them just to make sure it wasn't a homicide. Usually we determined a motive for suicide and found a note or other indicator that the person killed themselves. One guy just taped a note to his chest that said "Happy now, bitch," and made sure his wife found him after he hanged himself. But occasionally you get a case where all forensic evidence indicates that the person killed themselves, but there's no note and no discernible reason why this person would be suicidal. These are people in good health with decent careers and a seemingly happy family life. But who knows what's really going on with someone? Here's the part that freaks me out. I've worked maybe 10 suicides like this. The last 3 before I left homicide all had the same thing at the scene. These was a little decorative wicker lighthouse at each location. It was the same lighthouse, same design and painted white and blue. It stuck out to me the first time because it was by the bed where the body was, but 2 weeks later I saw the same damn lighthouse on another suicide and even pointed out the coincidence to a patrol officer. A few months later I go on another suicide and I see that same wicker lighthouse. That's when it clicks that it's always been unexplained suicides. I go back and look at crime scene photos from every suicide I've worked. In 2 of them I see what could be the wicker lighthouse, but the angle is off and there's too much junk around to say for sure. I dunno. I thought it was creepy as hell, but I transferred a couple of months later and I let it go. I was an EMT for a while. We got a call about someone who was riding their bike at a breakneck speed when they hit a car head first without a helmet. We went over immediately. Despite the fact that it was broad daylight and we were in the middle of suburbia on a Saturday, nobody even came to check on this poor guy. Seriously, the streets were empty. Usually a massive crowd gathers around violent accidents like this. So his skull was pretty much smashed in and he was unresponsive. It was the worst head injury I'd ever seen. We assessed that he had a major skull fracture, a concussion, and he was bleeding profusely. He was also missing teeth and had a minor road rash, but fortunately he wasn't missing much skin. To give you an idea of how bad it was, this was the kind of injury that most people don't survive. If you did survive, you'd basically be a crippled vegetable. Normally we would have moved him off the road, but when someone has a head/neck injury that isn't very safe. My partner, who was also training me as I was still kinda new, went to check his pulse while I began to unload our gear. He crouched down, felt for a pulse for a while, and then stood up and opened his mouth to say something. Suddenly, the guy fucking jumped up. He didn't use his arms to pick himself up, he just fucking jumped to his feet. It startled the 2 of us. He looked at us, smiled, and attempted to grab his bike. We tried to stop him, but we didn't exactly want to wrestle him to the ground given his condition. He gets away from us and bolts into the woods without his bike. My partner was in even more disbelief than I was. He just stared at where the man had run off, mouth agape. Then he turned to me and muttered he had no fucking pulse, man. I asked him if he was sure and he swore up and down that the biker was clinically dead. We contacted the authorities for assistance and they sent a search and rescue team into the forest. I don't know if he was found or not, because we normally don't get much information about patients after they go to the professionals. Keep in mind that this was the Pine Barrens, so they had a lot of ground to cover. My best guess is that he went to a loved one's house out of confusion. What I found odd about that is, head injuries bleed like fucking hell, so you'd think the guy would leave a long red trail of blood for the cops to follow. This is a good supernatural/paranormal story rather than a creepy one. I'm a detective and spent some time as an expert on sex crimes and crimes against children. It was the best/worst assignment I've had. One case I had came in at midnight. A young woman with a toddler comes into one of the precincts to report her ex-boyfriend raped her during a custody argument. Long story short, it was legit, and one of the most violent and sadistic cases I've ever had, so I'll spare the gruesome details. I still have no idea how this woman made her own way to a precinct with a toddler. Part of the investigation requires me to talk to the toddler. Victim said the toddler was present for everything. I'm a child forensic interviewer as well. During the interview, the toddler recalls their father becoming angry and hitting the mom. Then, the toddler said that the nice woman showed up and she couldn't see past the nice woman. The nice woman held her and told her that they were both going to be safe and sang her a song in a different language. The toddler said the nice woman went over to the front door and knocked on the door. Then, the nice woman helped them and their mom to the car before flying away. In the victim's interview, she said that her ex-boyfriend had a knife to her throat and put it to the skin to cut her throat open, but he got distracted for some reason, then ran out of the apartment. She had no explanation why. The suspect was caught about 8 hours later. He confessed to absolutely everything. When I asked him about the knife to the throat, he said this: "I swear to God I was gonna cut the bitch's throat open. But I thought I heard a knock at the door and thought it was the police. Once I saw it was clear, I ran outside." He is now serving life in prison, and the mom and toddler are safe and doing well. I'd love to know more about the nice woman. My dad used to work as a correctional officer at Goulburn Jail in Australia, which is probably one of the oldest and hardest prisons there. A story he tells of his time there is one I always remember. He said that the whole place was creepy anyway, not helped by some of the inmates at the time, including the notorious Ivan Milat, on which Wolf Creek is based. Anyway, first thing he noticed was that dogs would outright refuse to enter the prison. He said they couldn't get them past the gate no matter how hard they tried. But the creepiest occurrence was one night when they heard the sound of running booted footsteps. Everyone was in their cells, so they couldn't figure out what was causing it. Next thing, all the doors of the open and unoccupied cells on the top floor were banged shut, one after the other with loud clangs. Then they see the source of the running noise. Now Dad swears this is what he and his colleague, so he has another witness, saw. Apparently they looked up and saw what looked like disembodied hobnail boots run down the aisle right over their heads, banging as they went. Dad decided to stop working in the prison not long after this. Super creepy. Not Labutam paramedic/fire. Late summer night, responding to a call in a rural area. My partner and I were driving down a winding 2-lane highway in the middle of nowhere. No light of any kind other than the headlights and moon. We're coming up on a sharp right turn when I see a man traveling across the grass from an area of brush. He's moving very quickly and smoothly as if hauling ass on a bicycle. No up and down motion like running. Obviously, I'm pretty confused about a hillbilly on a bike in the middle of the night, but not surprised. He comes to a tree and stops. It's about this time we're driving by him. Look out window and see a man standing next to this tree with no bike or anything in sight. Just standing there staring at the truck passing by. My hair is standing up. We continue towards the call and I asked my partner if he had seen that guy. His response is, "Man, I thought I was crazy."